in one place and in 3 dimensions. It is really terrific to be back at a Rotary meeting. I want to thank you for that. But I also realize that with all these empty seats at the front, I sort of feel like I'm back at Mass too. So thank you. It's a 2 for me today. Have you ever had the experience of coming into the acquaintance of someone, say as a workmate, and after spending a little bit of time with them, you realize that the skills they bring are impressive, more impressive than you understood when you first met them. And the knowledge and the wisdom, the depth of wisdom they bring to every conversation is truly profound. And the impact that they've had, the network that they've built long before you met them is even a little bit intimidating. It's not very impressive. And somewhere along the way, you realize that you're not just glad to be on the same team with them, you're actually very proud to be on the team with them. Have you ever had that experience? Because I'm curious what's that's like. Oh, if we didn't kind of adore one another, I wouldn't have gotten away with that. That describes exactly the experience that I've had in coming to become a teammate of our speaker today. She is a lifelong Topeka. She and her husband, Chris, have 2 children who are grown, but owing to her day job, she probably, like me, feels like she's surrounded by children all day anyway. She spent 28 years in the marketing industry with Jones JHP, and then prior to that, the Harry Turner firm. She has shown her passion and commitment to her various communities in a number of ways. She was the national chair of MANA. She was the chair of Parks for All, the Foundation for Parks for All. She's involved with the Kansas Historical Society. I've just learned today that she owns her own line of hemp products. So there's a whole nother program waiting for us in there somewhere. She runs the program called Leadership Greater Topeka, which some of you may have participated in. She administers a relatively new product that the Greater Topeka Partnership offers called Executive Immersion Services, which is a way of bringing incoming sort of C-suite executives very quickly up to speed with a customized set of meetings and connections, so that when they get, after a couple of weeks in Topeka, they're already very well connected, thanks to our speaker. And perhaps more to the point, she manages the program, or the thing that we call Momentum 2022. She'll tell you more about that and how that's going and going into the future. But I'll tell you from a practical point of view, here's what it means. Many communities do strategic planning, and they put them in a book and put them up on the shelf. Your speaker is the person in this community who wakes up every morning and makes sure that that strategic plan is living and breathing and moving forward. She keeps us all very honest in terms of our role in moving it forward. So will you please join me in welcoming the Senior Vice President of Strategy for the Greater Topeka Partnership, Michelle Cuevas Stubblefield.
I am going to share this page so you can all see it online. Thank you so much. He is so eloquent. He always makes me sound way better than, oh my gosh. I'll pay him later though. I want to share this document. All right, make sure you can see online. All right, well, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here. What I want to do is kind of give you a little bit about me. Born and raised, 3 generations here in Topeka. I love this community. I'm a Seaman Viking, always lived up north. Most of my family still lives up north. Just very proud to be in this community. I love watching it evolve. The thing that I think I love most about this community is that you can create your destiny here. There's a lot of places that are already established, but you can really have an impact on the change that happens here in Topeka. Oh, thank you so much. Okay, try to be close. So I'm going to give you guys some information today about where we are with Momentum. Okay, so Momentum was pretty much launched in 2017 to 2018. And then we reached our 2.5-year midpoint in June of 2020. Okay, not a great time to have mid-course correction. So, however, we went ahead and did our survey and really looked and reassessed where we were and were we making the changes that we wanted to see and how we were going to evolve. So basically, I'm going to give you some results from the survey. And then please, if you have any questions as I'm speaking, please just go ahead and raise your hand. I'd rather prefer this to be very interactive. Okay. So the 2020 survey, we had basically had 5 main areas. We had 43 questions. We wanted to look at basic demographics, the geography, the community, some education, and economic development. The interesting thing about this survey was the original survey really involved a lot of respondents who were from corporate organizations, larger organizations. This time around, we really reached out to school districts, churches, community centers, and got a wider breadth of, I think, just kind of everyday Topekans. Most came from school districts, so we got a good breadth there, basically off the website. And then we really looked at that young professionals group. So we got quite a bit of input from Forge. Other interesting thing about this is the median time completion was 9 minutes. So they really spent time giving their input. And we had, can't really see it with here, but it's over 2,150 respondents. I will tell you, for a community of our size, 2,000 in respondents is really a good rate of response. Gender representation. We had 32% male response, but we had 68% female response. We're probably going to conduce that to the fact that most women probably check the kids' book bags at school to see what's going on, and then they probably made that input for us. Racial representation. Interesting thing about this is when we look at the population is that we did, even the African-American Hispanic market was still underrepresented. However, we did get a little closer to our population rate. So it was, so in 2016 comparison of 4.1 for Black, not Hispanic, we had 5.7 and the population is 9.3. And then Hispanic or Latinx, 3.9% in 2016, 5.5% in 2020. However, our population is still 12.6. So again, still some disparities there. Education representation. This was interesting. 2016 to 2020, we still had about the same rate in high school graduate. However, we really reached a higher level into the population and representing population into some college, no degree. So I think that's where we're reaching kind of those everyday families. Associate's degree was pretty much in line between 2016 and 2020. Bachelor's, we had less, but we still had above our population mix. And then postgraduate was fairly considerable to 2016. Age representation, this was really exciting to see. In 2016, we had a very smaller amount in the 2016 in comparison to 2020. Our population for that age group is 11.3%. We far surpassed that within about 17%. So we really got some good info from them. And then the other mix there, most of those were fairly equal, even though the percentages are less. The other one was we had less representation, but more info from the 2016 and the 65 and older. So 2 ends of the scale, we've got probably the most input from. Geospatially, most of it was 66604, 66614. Most of that was southeast or southwest Topeka. And then we got pockets throughout. So if you look at the zip codes, the most frequent was the 14, 04, 10, 06, and 11. So we've got some other East Topekas and the 05s as well. So it gave us a good mix. Education. Here's what is interesting. The survey, really what I'm showing you here is the survey participants rated 10 different comments regarding local education. The highest scores were children in the district receiving high education. Okay, so that statement, what's interesting about that is there's this perception that there are inferior schools and adequate schools, okay, or non-inferior schools. However, when you ask the individual family if their child is receiving a high quality education, that was a #1 ranking that they all agreed upon. Regardless of my school district, if I speak specifically about my school district, my child is receiving a quality education. So it's an interesting paradox between that perception of what you have a perception of someone else's school. The other concept that was probably the lowest score was schools provide high quality career guidance and college counseling. So how we're responding to that was, one, we have to ask ourselves, we're currently doing an inventory of what are all the availabilities for a student regardless of district that is available to them. If we ask from a professional standpoint, most the districts are telling us there's a breadth of opportunity that the student can take advantage of. What we're also finding is businesses are more than willing to help education provide those educational opportunities, whether they be apprenticeships, internships, or whatever. So the question we are asking ourselves, is it a matter of awareness? And those are some of the things that we're looking at. Is it just we're not reaching the right channels to present that information, or are what we're providing not of interest to the student and family? So some of those things are things that we are looking at as well. We had some open-ended questions for those. And what we did basically here is we took those open-ended questions and then we pulled in the keywords that were presented to give us an idea of just true comment perceptions, okay? So the open-ended questions, what do you think needs to be done, if anything, to improve a school district? The school needs were, by 45%, better education or better communication practices, family needs, student needs, and security. So a lot of that was actually that food, clothing, shelter. Now you also have to remember this is also during the time of COVID, but even if it wasn't during COVID, we would probably expect to see some of this because of the inequities that we're actually finally realizing. And then focus was less on testing and more focus on the child. So again, mental health, physical, everything else for the child. Then 10% on funding, not surprising. And then 24% supporting our teachers, improving wages, those type of things that can help our teachers effectively teach. Economic development. So the economic development system, rating system, and in Shawnee County, this is from an entrepreneurial climate, okay? So what we find, and probably what we've learned, is that there's a very, very strong entrepreneurial climate. However, it's pretty much a niche market, okay? You're either completely impassioned by entrepreneurism, or you've heard the word and, you know, hey, go you type of thing, okay? So the question is, and a lot of these are fairly low scores, but most of them say, what sounds good is angel investment, venture capitalism, seed loans. So there's a strong interest in obtaining those funds so that those who are in the entrepreneurial realm can advance, okay? The other part of this is the lowest scores are mentor opportunity meetups, small business development support, and low ratings than previous. And these are lower ratings than 2016, okay? Now, if you're in the niche, if you're in this niche, so much has been done within 2016 to now. Again, we have to look and see where are we missing the mark? Because within this time period, we have the wheelhouse. We had 712, but now we've got some other maker spaces. We've got a number of things that have been happening. We now have plug and play. We have a number of things that have been happening. So again, is this a matter of communication? Is this a matter of not reaching the target niches, or what has changed? When we look at 2016 to now, some of the things that are completely different is the bio, aviation, finances, that interest is still in play. So we're seeing some shifts, but we're also questioning the reasonings for those. So what could be done to enhance Topeka, Shawnee County entrepreneurial capacity and ecosystem? This is interesting because, again, from a general perspective, most people responded with, I don't know. Okay, so there's a real interest there, but we're not knowing how to do that, which affirms that the ecosystem is extremely complex, depending on where you come from that, okay? But there was interest in Innovation Campus, which is things we've been talking about, especially along the riverfront, and support minorities, greater interest in providing opportunities and small business support and training and connections, those type of things. And then continue to support the GTP small business grants. We can tell you that that probably has been one of the biggest game changers in Momentum 2022, especially during COVID. With seeing small private business come together, create an initiative that basically kept businesses alive. And then the economic development workforce, the survey rated 10 comment. Let's see, did I do that wrong? Yeah, survey participated 10 different comments regarding local workforce. So the highest score was quality certification, vocational programs, and readily available in the county, and 2-year, 4-year degree that support workforce needs. Employers are readily available in Northeast Kansas region. So the need for making sure that we have a qualified workforce is important. The lowest score was my business frequently has to consider recruit from outside the greater northern region. Now, the interesting thing about here is even if it's a lower score, this is from an employee perspective, okay? So what we also have to ask is now we need to measure what is the employer's response to this. Are they actually going out to recruit outside of the county, to other regions, or is this actually an employee perspective? So some things to consider. So from the community's perspective, the greatest strength that we have is 46% cost of living, not a surprise, 9% location, 36% community, and 7% jobs, okay? Community's biggest challenge is 23% community, 6% housing, I'd expect that number to be higher, 6% taxes, and 5% crime. Okay. I think when you look at both the greatest strengths and the greatest challenges, it all kind of depends on what part of the street you're standing on, okay? And what perspective that you have when you're standing there. So when we look at the rating, Topeka and Shawnee County, what we realized was, and some of those where the ratings were very poor to below average, was 67% ability to shop, restaurants, and services. Now, the big difference between 2016 and 2020 data is the inclusion of without using a car, okay? So now there is a real interest in walkability, being able to go get something to eat, saunter down and visit some shops, go somewhere else, have coffee, ice cream, go somewhere else and maybe visit a park, or get your cleaning while you're doing all that, but in a walkable environment, okay? The other one is 55% nightlife options for adults. That is something that has continued, has been a conversation for several years, but still maintains interest. And then 51% shopping opportunities, okay? The next one is above average or excellent. 49% volunteer opportunities. I don't know if most of you know that Topeka nationally is considered, we are probably 250% above the national norm for volunteerism. Our community, that is our community makeup. We are known as givers and working our volunteerism and being involved in our community. 44% overall cost of living is considered average or excellent. And then 42% availability of quality healthcare options, okay? Now, between very poor below average, and above average or excellent, can you tell me which demographic is which? So what we found out is basically you're seeing the extremes of our respondent data, okay? So the very poor to below average is at 18 to 24, and the above average to excellent is 45 plus, okay? So what we found out that is when you are anybody between 35 below probably has something that they're not crazy about, okay? Anybody who's 35 or 40 above probably has a family, established, has found their forever home, has made Topeka their home, realizes they're going to need quality health care as they get older. This is a great place to live for all that, and it's affordable. So how do we balance those? Now, the interesting thing about Topeka is in its innovation is we use the Net Promoter Score. The Net Promoter Score is a score that normally is used by corporate organizations. So an example is Facebook uses the Net Promoter Score. And last time we checked, their Net Promoter Score was a -24, okay? The Net Promoter Score is a -100 to a +100, okay? Your chances of getting to that 0 or above is pretty difficult. Your chances of maintaining a 0 above is even harder, okay? So when we first took this test for the very first time, we were at a -55, okay? Not good. What happened was though, however, is after that end of 2018 to 2019, we did the test again, okay? That test, we were at -26, okay? Which is a huge jump. If you look at and talk to industry experts, that is hardly ever seen. So that was a 47% jump. So it's something we definitely need to be proud of. So again, COVID throws a wrench in all this, okay? But we needed to test again. So in 2020, we test and did the Net Promoter Score. And what we found was women were -33%, men were -26%, and combined, it was a -31%, okay? So, and just so you make sure you understand the Net Promoter, it is, are you willing to refer Topeka to community? Are you willing to make positive reference? So from a race perspective, or Latinx was -25, white was -29, and the African-American market was -35, okay? I would probably claim to a certain extent, some of that is cultural in how you view the world, as well as equity and disparities within your life. So is why you're seeing those numbers. An example for me is, why is the Latinx -25? Why is that higher than the white? I would contain that in most cases, the Hispanic or Latinx market is driven by faith. So regardless of your hardship, you have faith that God will provide or that your life will be better, simply by faith. So that's one reason we probably consider, why is that a -25 and higher? So we took all this information, okay? We provided a report for the community. We kind of got some perceptions about where we were, because currently we have 5 pillars, 5 goal areas, 14 objectives, and 46 recommendations in the original document. Out of that, we added recommendations on how to change things that weren't originally in the document too. So we're kind of doubling down here on these last 20 months. We're going to concentrate on the career guidance training for students. Again, really analyzing, is it perception, is it awareness, or are they the wrong opportunities? We're looking at housing. It's clear that right now we don't have the inventory to the housing that we need in this community. 2 weeks ago, I heard that we probably have about 60 houses on the market when normally we have way more than that. And the average house is probably 20 to 30, 40,000. You're paying more than you normally would, just because of the availability. We're going to continue to look at the dynamic core, and that also includes the riverfront again, and that leads into the next one of mixed use development. So that walkability, bringing new businesses in within a living workplace environment. So that's that mixed use development part. And then what we're adding to it, and we basically learned some of this from COVID, but also in just how people have shifted within just a 2.5 year, 3-year period, is diversity, equity, inclusion, with racial justice on all that happened last year, and then just a shift in thought and intention. That is an area, especially at the GTP, we have committed to. Alignment of the arts. I'll tell you a little story here, and if you've been a part of Heartland Visioning, I think you understand why we included this one. A big part of Heartland Visioning, close to the beginning of Momentum 2022, is NODO. We've seen the progress. We've seen that explosion. We've seen it is still active today. Well, once that was open, we never talked about the arts again. Okay, so I think what we're realizing, especially with this new mix, plug and play, there is a creative class that we need to answer to in our community. And arts is a true quality of life component. And it also has grand effect on our economy. So we're going to take a look, especially with the riverfront coming into play and other things, is how do we align the arts into that and make it a component of our economy? And then we learned this one basically through COVID. We've heard it before. People have talked about the need, but now with COVID, this definitely came to light, and we saw our inequities. We saw kids having to sit underneath the lamppost to get internet. We had to move a bus to a location so they'd have bandwidth. Digital equity and access is really going to be a component that we are already, as a group, trying to advance forward. And then the final is a theme of everything we do. We are going to look at it from the young professional's perspective. Okay. I wish I was a young professional at this time because having the voice of young professionals, these are the ones we want to listen to. We want to know what the 20-somethings or the 18, the 16, the 13-year-old wants in this community, because everything that we create and is being created, they will have the opportunity to take advantage of. So that thought and that voice is extremely important to us. At this point in the game, we are, like I said, 20 months out. We are already starting to think about the next strategy. People always go, wow, when's this strategy going to be done? And normally what we say is there is no end. Okay. A strategy and objective is never done. We may shift, sunset it for a little bit, but we're always going to keep our eye on the ball and see if something needs to be reactivated or tweaked or reprioritized. So we are currently looking at best practices. We are currently looking for new strategic partners. And then by the 1st of 22, before this year's or before this strategy ends, we will already be working on the next strategy to begin January 1 of 2023. So that's kind of it in a quick nutshell. Any surprises for you guys?
But when was the survey done?
The survey was done, it began in August of 2019 and ended in probably like December of that same year.
I just think it's fascinating. You said more than once in your presentation, I'm not going to say it as well as you did, but that there's lots of moving parts in how these answers were generated. When I look, for instance, at the there's nothing to do here answers, but the fact that we have more young people answering it than we did before, young people typically think there's nothing to do where they live for grown-ups to do, because it's just the way it goes. And so it, to have been a fly on the wall as you all analyze these things, and back to the entrepreneurs, that's the other one that taught me, because if you made some good comments about how small a sector that is really in a community, and if most of the people who were answering the survey were not interested in being entrepreneurs at work, then the fact that they just said, let's give them some money and hope that they get started, but didn't rate the opportunities for them to network and so on, has finally made some sense. And so I'm really glad that you shared that you did the demographic analysis of who was taking it in the first place, and clearly brought that back to the table as you look at some of the answers.
Yeah, you really can't look. And the interesting thing about Topeka, as much most people don't realize, is that the average market has about 15 demographics. Because we are so metro or urban and rural, we actually have about 32 different demographics within our community. So it's really important that we kind of really dig down and kind of question the data because of the demographics being so broad.
One of the comments I thought in one section was around workers are readily available. And then that might have been true, whereas right now, most people I'm talking to in business can't find enough workers.
Mhm.
Some are kind of shutting their doors temporarily.
Yeah, and some of that is the retail and restaurant worker. Those are the ones who lower rate and pay. I think we heard yesterday, and I wish I remember the number, Curtis, if you can help me here. You make more money staying home, okay, than you do in that work range. You make more money staying home than going back to work. That is also the group that has the least access or least availability to flexible healthcare, or not flexible childcare. Okay, that brings up another topic, though, is we have in this community, as some of the objectives, is we have high food deserts. Okay, at least five neighborhood areas have no walkable way to get food. And if they do, it's a convenience store, so it's not healthy food. And we have high disparities or high in childcare deserts. So for someone to come into this market to be able to find adequate childcare or at least availability of childcare is also extremely difficult. So
I'm surprised that maybe didn't make the list, childcare.
Yeah. So that's kind of where we're at in the mix. Obviously, this won't communicate everything because we were looking at the education and economic aspect. So.
Well, I think your population too. I think it was your 18 to 25-year-olds and your 65-year-olds that are a good portion of it. 12 years is exactly.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
That's a great point. And those in that those other scales are pretty happy with their life anyway. So, yeah. Any other questions?
Along the lines of what Angel just said, did you step back from some of those questions and evaluate whether they were still really issues? Like if the child care didn't apply, for instance, and many people will choose to go a distance to get their child in a certain person's house anyway, let's say, or maybe it's close to work, it's not close to home. I don't know if there are paradigms. I guess I've been struggling, as you can imagine, I've been thinking with the issue of food deserts, because I watched that, most of the poor people were going out to Wanamaker and shopping at Sam's Club and Walmart anyway. What difference, certainly there are people that lost that contact, but I wonder, especially with COVID now, that stores are delivering. They did before, but now you can get groceries. Whether we need to re-examine some of the paradigms as well. When Dillon's closed, for instance, in Central Topeka, we evaluated what was lost. And certainly it was the groceries, but we also had a pharmacy. We
Yep.
were on 3 bus lines really close. There was a service desk to pay utility bills. And although most of us laughed about it, perhaps maybe fifth, but maybe most important was it was a social center.
Yep.
And you ran into people. It was we joked that it was the center of our social lives. But you know, some of those things, just like the child care one, I'm sure you've got maybe the Momentum 2022 groups are serving as focus groups to kind of tear those apart sometimes, but we get stuck in those old ways, let's say, of defining some things that maybe have changed, like deliveries of groceries.
Right, so are you maybe saying it turns out that in a food desert, there might be water in the sand, that we had been thinking that way, but in fact, we might need to loosen up what we mean and what needs to be addressed. Am I hearing you?
Yeah, I mean, when Dylan's went under, there were all these people who said, oh gosh, if I'd only known I would have shop there.
Yeah.
Oh, and included in that was, well, but we don't shop there because they don't have organic produce. Well, they did have organic produce, those people just didn't shop there. You know, there's more to just a whole lot of these things. And we talked with Grace Med about whether they could serve as a social center, because what's almost as important for a lot of the people, and again, I'm most focused on my neighborhoods, is that they could get up and walk over. The exercise and just getting out of their house, which delivering groceries doesn't solve. It solves the food issue, but it doesn't solve the other aspects of having a neighborhood-based grocery store. And so,
But I think another component to question is in your neighborhood, I think if I remember correctly, there's a large percentage of those who are with disabilities. So they may not have the opportunity to be as mobile as they may prefer to. So yeah, there's a lot of variables
we
and
still have Tolles Market on 6th and Western.
Yeah.
But people would walk past my house on Lake Street and walk from all the way from Woodby neighborhood to Dillon's with the kids and the dog. And so we like have a grocery store, but people don't count it.
Mhm.
So how does that factor?
Yeah.
You know, and factoring those sorts of things in terms of whether neighborhood-based small grocery stores, the bodega style or whatever, would actually be used or not.
Yeah.
Price-wise and.
well, what we found out really with both of those datas in 2016 and 2018, that childcare wasn't necessarily brought up, but what was an interest was early childhood literacy, which to advance that is a component of their quality of life as well. So we're looking at where they have those availabilities at an early age and what support do the families have as well. So any other questions?
I just want to say I appreciate your focus on the art, including the arts, because they do.
Yes, yes. Thank you, Anita. Thank you. You're definitely a key to that. All right. Thank you.
Great presentation. One of the things I love about Rotary is just keeping up on what's going on in the community. And this is a great opportunity to do that. To commemorate your presentation, it's our longtime practice. We donate a book to Ross Elementary School. We will ask you here in a moment to sign the book plate. And I think that's it. I don't have any additional announcements, but we will have be back here next week. The presenter will be Sheena Ward from the Breakthrough House. And I think we are ready to stand and do the four-way test, if we could. Of the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And will it be kind and fun? We add that. Thank you, everybody.
Hi, everyone.